I call the honourable member Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. For the third reading of a rather uncontroversial bill on a fairly straightforward amendment, we have had a very wide-ranging debate on a number of issues in relation to our banking system. Some of it was literally from cloud cuckoo land, and I did notice also a bit of a rewrite of history. So I do feel compelled to clear up a couple of misapprehensions that the member Stuart Nash had about why we have KiwiBank. Because the rewrite of history is that this is a Labour Party invention, and that now that it's here we should protect it with every fibre we have. Well, that wasn't the case, really, was it, Mr Speaker? Because in 1999 to 2002, the Labour government relied very heavily on the Alliance Party and Deputy Prime Minister Jim Anderton. And were it not for that reliance, the reluctant Dr Michael Cullen, who was led kicking and screaming into the formation of KiwiBank, it would not have taken place. So let the Labour Party take the credit for KiwiBank. But were it not for Mr Anderton and members long since gone from this House, the KiwiBank would not exist. And I do note the track record on asset sales of financial institutions. I should actually say, Mr Speaker, that in 1984 or so, when Westpac was formed, it was formed out of two other Australian banks, the Bank of New South Wales and the Commercial Bank of Australia. I have vague recollections of that. I worked across the road from a couple of those branches in Dunedin at the National Bank, a national bank that was then owned by Lloyds Bank plc, a UK-based bank, as were a number of the other banks in New Zealand. So these committed Labour people in the 1980s not only sold the Development Finance Corporation, the Post Office Savings Bank, Rural Banking Finance, but we also, in that term, had, wait for it, a mixed ownership model. The partial float of that iconic then New Zealand-owned institution, the Bank of New Zealand. And in 1986, the fourth Labour government, I should say, floated the Bank of New Zealand. Own the history, members over there. So I would suggest that the crocodile tears being shed for the New Zealand banking system are just that. And I think Mr Finlayson put it as very accurately in his general debate: lions in opposition, lambs in government. And fairly inarticulate lambs if Jacinda Ardern's call in the general debate is anything to go by. It's been nearly a year since Mr Goff announced that the Labour Party would no longer support the monetary policy accord. And where the Labour Party are on their alternative monetary policy, who knows? Are they going to print money? Are they going to go back? Are they going to go back to fixing the dollar against an international currency? They are so concerned that the dollar is so high. It's a pity they weren't that concerned when the interest rates were so high and the dollar remained stubbornly high, because that was killing our export markets. At least now the New Zealand dollar against the trade-weighted index is lower than it has been since 2007. And were it not for the fact that the United States have twice printed money in that magical thing they call quantitative easing, we would probably be in a better position. But it is not for this economy to control what that economy does. Now, I do acknowledge that Mr Cunliffe did recognise and take very seriously the issue of New Zealand's debt position. And also acknowledging in his call, with big nods from Mr Parker, that the private debt situation is particularly concerning. We on the side of the House don't distinguish as much, because the international financiers of that debt don't distinguish so much between private and public debt. And nevertheless, it was pleasing to hear Mr Cunliffe's concern for debt levels. So it is really quite perplexing that Labour would go out and campaign on increasing New Zealand's total debt by billions and billions of dollars, not only in their reckless spending, but also in a return to the funding of the government superannuation fund and borrowing to put money into KiwiSaver. Well, this was a broad-ranging debate, and I'm just addressing the issues that were raised by Labor members earlier in the speeches. So here we have Mr Cunliffe still insisting that this great sooth that he is, this great financial soothsayer, is so confident that the markets will go up, that he would go to the international debt markets and borrow billions and billions of dollars on a financial crapshoot by putting it into the government superannuation fund. But here's my question. If Mr Cunliffe was such a great sooth when it comes to picking financial markets, why, in early 2008, was he not trotting along to the offices of the good Dr Cullen, who was then Minister of Finance, and saying, "Doc, I think the international financial markets are in trouble. I think we should be moving these equities in the government superannuation fund into fixed interest. Let's preserve the country's assets." Because if he's really that good at picking the markets, that's what he would have done nearly 4 years ago. He didn't. It's rhetoric. And if he gets a hold of the Treasury benches, goodness knows what the debt levels will be and where that money goes. So, having addressed some of the many broad-based arguments that were raised in this third reading of the otherwise uncontroversial, straightforward, structural change to the Westpac New Zealand bill, I commend it to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. As many of that opinion will please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Westpac New Zealand bill, third reading.
Call on private and local order of the day.